Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to another edition of the Doctor's Lab. We've decided to recommence what we started last week, this week, and not keep it fortnightly because of requests and because of how pertinent this particular subject is. So, leaving a part two for another 2 weeks, we think would have lost the impetus that was gathered from last week, hence us coming back a week later, inshallah. And today I think we will be looking more at the challenges of Hijrah and trying to, again, place that in the context of what was established and so eloquently outlined by Khalid last week with the evidences that we looked at. So before I dive in even further, apologies for starting a bit late today. And if we've caught some of you by surprise being a week later, again, apologies for that if you were expecting us to be there next week. And without further ado, brother and Dr. Khalid Green is here with me as usual. And assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Hayyakum Allah. And it's a pleasure to be back and to engage. It's a pleasure to be back and engage.
Alhamdulillah. Jazakallah khair, brother Khalid. Yes, I think last week, I just want to highlight, I think one of the sisters, after hearing your description of what it was like in Seattle, actually mentioned that it would be nice to make Hijrah to Seattle. And after seeing the video that you shared today with the nasiha that you were giving and seeing those animals and the wild, the scenery there, even myself, I was thinking, if I'm coming to America, I want to be living in that area, mashallah.
Come on,
beautiful scenery, invited. Mashallah.
Yeah.
Now, Khalid, today, in continuation of what we discussed last week, let's look at some of the more pragmatic, practical challenges that are actually there with regards to Hijrah. Let's start from the very first sort of step, okay, of deciding that you want to be moving to the land of the Muslims from the land of the non-Muslims. If we were moving from America, moving from the UK, and some of the practical implications of that. Now, that will still be tinged with a degree of idealism, because that drive, this is what I'm asking, this is what I'm suggesting, that tinge of idealism is there, and it would have to be there to provoke that initial step to leave your country of origin or where you're settled in the first place. Am I right, or would you disagree with that?
Yeah, of course. I think that inspires the people or motivates the people. You know, there is that concept. You've read this in the text. You've seen the fatwa and these things. These encourage you. And you know, I've had people ask about Hijrah and stuff, and you know, because of they felt, you know, from what they had read, that it was just an obligation. There was nothing else to look at, regardless of their circumstances. And so, you know, I had to try to advise them accordingly. So, of course, yeah, I think the you know, by reading and so forth, this is going to give you the hukum, the rulings on Hijrah, you know, fatwa about Hijrah, looking at the seerah and so forth. And you can easily have your own perception of what it's like to be Hijrah. To make Hijrah, you know. So of course, a lot of us, when we left our countries to either make Hijrah or seek knowledge or the various endeavors we tried to do, that we had idealism. We had you know, I can definitely say, even my trying to seek knowledge, my intent was not Hijrah, but I had you know, I had a lot of idealism of what it was going to be like to be in a Muslim land. And going to Yemen, you know, I was a bit frustrated and discouraged initially.
Mashallah.
Yeah.
Now, and before I get into that, answering and addressing those points you've highlighted, wa alaikum salam to our brothers and sisters, Niama, Kira, Octavia, Matteo, Nate, who's joined us. I want to say salams to all of you regulars who were there, mashallah, tabarakallah. One of you said Hijrah to a Muslim land. Yes, we discussed aspects of this primarily last week, mashallah. And I would say, yes, Khalid, that idealism that's actually there, as you've just intimated, can be met once embarking upon travels and landing in that the destination of choice, in disappointment, in upset, in frustration. And I remember meeting individuals, because as I said, I haven't done Hijrah of the physical sense of the heart. Yes, mashallah, tabarakallah. I'm working over here. Yes, living over here, and hopefully living here as long as possible. 19 years, mashallah. Hope it goes for another 19 and then some, inshallah. But the point now is, when I first traveled on Umrah, and I was surprised when I was a new Muslim. It was 1992. I'd be embraced 2 years before, and I had that idealism and that excitement of going to the Haram for the first time and everything. And I met a group of British brothers, and the attitude that I was met with, and they were Hujjaj as well. They were doing Umrah. Wa alaikum salam rahmatullah, reactionary Bilal as well, who salamed us. Wa alaikum salam rahmatullah. And their behavior was so discouraging. It was as though you shouldn't be here, get in to do what you need to do and get out. The people are like this. And it wasn't racism they were speaking about or anything. That there was a black individual amongst them, a white convert, Asian individual. And it surprised me. But when I learned later on that their actual underpinning of Muslims was not based on the Sunnah, and I'm not saying that that has anything to do with something one way or the other, but there was a political persuasion, as we spoke about last week, where there's a disdain for anything Gulf, anything Middle Eastern. People who have got the Haramain are undeserving of it, and these sort of things were the undercurrents that I determined as I grew. So my thing is that the idealism is there, but it can be dashed immediately, whether you're doing Hijrah, whether you're doing Umrah, whether you're doing Hajj. I remember doing my second Hajj, I believe it was, and it was our Hajj package actually, and I was with doctors, their wives with their husbands, and I was asked to accompany a brother who was a doctor. His wife was a doctor, and she was so disheartened by the way the Muslims were behaving on Hajj, by the debris and the rubbish that was piling up around us in those days. And she was thinking, we're Muslims. This is the epitome of my worship. We've saved for years to do this, and I'm witnessing all of this. And I understood what she was saying, because it was all around to see. Everyone for themselves, everyone not caring about the other, the lack of hygiene that was in some areas of performing the Hajj and everything. And yet I had to still try and advise her with her husband there, because he wanted me to speak with her as we was going, because she was so down. We're in the heart of Hajj. We're in the middle of Hajj, this spiritual journey. And yet this was the disheartenment, how broken she was. And I had to advise her about focusing on why she's here, the test of Hajj. What did she expect? It wasn't going to be a 5-star holiday, even if you had the best Hajj package that was actually going. I had to try and encourage her on that, transferring that to Hijrah and magnifying that by 5, 6, 10 times. Let's speak to that hardship that you mentioned and described last week, Brother Khalid, on the hardship that's there. Wa alaikum salam, Sister Balahat. And we have our dear brother, all of you are dear to us, but Abdul Haqq has joined us, someone known to both Brother Khalid, who was in Yemen with the brother, and myself, who was in Saudi with the brother, mashallah. Good to see that you've joined us. Those of you who don't know Abdul Haqq, please look up his lectures on YouTube. Very beneficial discourses that are there, mashallah. But Khalid, coming back to that hardship, I've just described an example an experience I faced having to advise a sister and her husband, with her husband there, on what she was facing during Hajj. And we all know that hardship in Hajj, We all know that when we're looking at those around us, that they're not all behaving in a particular way that we are familiar with, either it be culturally, be it hygienically, because of different backgrounds and everything. How much harder is it from a perspective of encountering that when doing Hijrah?
Mm. I know Abdullah has some interesting stories himself, and I won't mention his stories. But anyhow, but we've witnessed a lot of people going through various struggles. Now, I want to put this disclaimer out there right off the get-go. I am definitely not discouraging anyone from making Hijrah. It's a major Islamic duty, and as which I believe is the most sound, authentic opinion, that it is under many circumstances mustahab, but it's going to depend on the scenario if you can practice your religion or not. So I have to put this disclaimer here because we always have to be, defined by our Islamic principles. So by no means am I discouraging people to make hijrah, but anytime you're doing great duties that you're going to come closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there's going to be great trials and tribulations more often than not. Seeking knowledge, which I've seen many people leaving and coming to seek knowledge. Even myself, when I initially left, talking about that idealism and so forth, and I'm going to mention some minor hardships that I experienced, but this were things that kind of broke my idealism. So I left, I got my ticket to go to Yemen. I was so excited when I first heard the adhan. I showed up in the airport in Sana'a. It had just come from a war. It looked like it was so small. It was like a taxi station, but this was the main airport. Holes in walls from gunshots, because they come from the Civil War. But I was so happy to be in a Muslim land and to hear the adhan, to wake up that first Fajr and go to the masjid. Although they had two adhans for Fajr, and it was actually a Shia, not a Zaydiyya, a particular sect of Shiism, but their masjid. So going to the masjid, and I happened to meet some Western brothers, maybe in the second time, some British brothers, and they kind of helped me to navigate a bit. But I can remember we went to play soccer or football, as you guys say, and my shoes got stolen. At the masjid, my shoes got stolen. Those things were just like, wow, I'm in the Muslim lands. How could this happen? I felt like there would be no sins. This is the concept. I think a lot of the idealism that many of us have. But as far as the actual hardships, I've known many people who are either on Hijrah or Talib al-Ilm, and they experience, great sicknesses and illnesses, the death of children, things like this. So it's not an easy path. It's never. So the way I preface it now, when I talk to people ask me about Hijrah, I'm always talking about from a perspective of that, yes, this is something legislated, it's a great duty, but I'm always talking about preparation. Always talking about preparation, that, hey, prepare yourself. Don't just show up in a country, you got $1,000 and think, it's all going to work out. Yes, it may work out, but you're putting yourself in potentially many have an opportunity for propensity for many greater struggles. You know what I mean? If something happens, or just the realities of life, you barely have enough to stay in your hotel. I've been where actually when I left Yemen, I went to the Emirates and I ran out of money because I heard there was an Islamic university, and I didn't want to go back to Damaj and places like this. I wanted a formal, because my idealism said I need to be in a classroom with the book and the paper and the pen and sitting in a desk. I wasn't ready for going to Damaj. I saw hyenas. I saw them. They cut off the head of the hyenas. I saw the animals that were around there, that the dogs, the puppies getting sick and dying of diseases. I tried to feed them, and the Yemenis looked at me like I was crazy and almost began to curse me because, why are you feeding? You went and spent your money on tuna and you fed these puppies? What, and we don't even eat this good, because this was up in the village. We ate fool, meat was a luxury. And all the brothers who, I didn't get severely sick there, but there's so many things that we witnessed, and the various trials and tribulations. So I just tried to emphasize to people, when it comes to the hijrah, or any, even talab al-ilm, when you're going abroad, to not be so idealistic. Know that these are real countries with real issues. These are human beings you're dealing with. Yes, they're Muslim, but they have their struggles and their struggles and trials and tribulations. And a lot of people take Islam for granted, you know. So your daily interactions, they don't think, oh, that was my Muslim brother. No, he curses him because he cut him off, or he, has, it was the first day of Ramadan. The guy gave me a racial slur when I was going to Sheher, or when I met Abdullah. I was leaving Sana'a, and the taxi driver had almost made us miss our flight. He blamed us. He said we had too much bags in his car. We're hurting his car. He wanted extra money. He barely got us to the airport on time when he dropped us off. And I finally got my baggage, and I was trying to be nice to him, even with all of this madness. And it was the first day of Ramadan. He called me a son of a black mother. I said, yeah. And I said, you're the son of a dog. And I was so mad, even though, yeah, I am a son of a black mother. My mom's black. Yeah, alhamdulillah. And, the point is you experience a lot of things that might be letdowns. I know some young British brothers who came and he was getting in fights all the time in Sana'a, and he had Yemenis pulling their jambia on him, trying to stab him, and he could box a little bit. So he was rolling them up. And, you have these various struggles. This is just a reality. So that picture perfect world, it's not there.
And as you said, Brother Khalid, placing everything within its context, great acts of worship are accompanied by hardship. We've got many statements from the Salaf with regards to acts of ibadah, what they endured, and things like this. You've mentioned deaths of children. Yes, I witnessed that. I experienced that, as I mentioned last week. And there's that knee-jerk reaction to bolt back to the place that you're from, that you're familiar with, when tragedy or catastrophe strikes. But if you know why you're there, then surely فَإِنَّ مَعَ الْأُسْرِ يُسْرًا إِنَّ مَعَ الْأُسْرِ يُسْرًا. The double relief does come after that hardship. But that hardship, it is exactly what it is. It is hardship that you are going to feel, and you're going to be wondering what's happening here. Now, while I'm not, as I said, one of those who's made Hijrah in that instance, we have lived, we have witnessed hardship. One of the things I say to brothers and sisters, couples that are moving abroad, if your relationship is not firm and you are not unified, or the solidarity isn't there, when you move abroad to a different land, whether it's Hijrah, whether you're going to work, whether you're out there for a period of time for whatever reason, any fractures, fissures in your relationship will become magnified when you are away from your country of origin. This I've seen time and time again, Brother Khalid. I don't know if you've seen it as well. If there are issues with your children that were unresolved, or they may have been unidentified, they will become magnified when you move to the land that you are going to. And the difficulty that you then face is you have no wider network, immediate network of family or friends that you can refer to or resort to address those issues. And more often than not, it leads to wider fissures, the wife going back to the country of origin, or the husband wanting to go back to the country of origin, and the sister saying, no, I'm going to be staying, or the brother saying, no, I'm going to be staying. And then the friction develops among or with regards to the children. These are some real examples that actually have taken place on many, many occasions. We've spoken last week, Brother Khalid, about children getting to a particular age, and they're adults now, and they now can speak and say, I am not staying in this. And they will go back they'll even go to the embassy and say, I want out. The American embassy, the British embassy, the Western embassy, and that embassy will take them in and accompany or facilitate their return as citizens of that particular country, and then they are out of the family loop, as it were. So these are some real aspects that, when coming out to these lands, to the Muslim lands, you really need to take stock of where you are with the family. And then another thing, Khalid, let's say none of those things are there. You've got a very tight relationship. Everything's really well. You're a close-knit family. But when you come out, problems do develop. Now, I want to ask you this, Khalid, if you've experienced it. And I'm trying to think of examples where I have and I haven't, where the family say, okay, we've got a problem here and we haven't got the infrastructure to help us deal with this. What do I mean by that? There's a religious courts and things, and I've seen that. I've had to go with individuals. They've gone to the judge and the lawyer, and they've had them arbitrate, and they're going according to the Sharia. They're doing all of that. Okay, the husband, the ex-wife, the ex-husband owe custody over the children. They've done all of that, but they still do not have that wider community support network. And in those instances, it's still difficult for it to work. When the judge is ruling in favor of the wife or in favor of the husband, it still does not satisfy the end result socio-culturally. Religiously, it does. And that becomes more of a bitter pill to swallow, because it's that clinical that it's a religious edict that has come out, but it does nothing in the sense of eliminating or dissipating the reality of the split on the ground. Now, my question to you is, do you know of circumstances where families who have faced that have said, let's go back to our home country, let's get our people involved, let's see if we can solve it, and they've been able to do that successfully and then return back to the Muslim land that they've chosen as an abode to live? Have you come across any examples like that? Because I haven't.
No, I've never come across any of those examples. But the scenario up until that, usually it results when there's that dissatisfaction. There's usually a split. Generally, there's usually a split in the family, even if they've got a religious verdict. Maybe one party is not accepting that verdict, and a lot of times it can be due to religiosity, or again, the judgment is a issue of ijtihad too. It's the judge. He's trying to make a ruling based on what he's heard and so forth. So, sometimes, more often than not, people are not willing to accept that. And I've seen many nightmares and more families split. But a lot of times, there's a lot of other things going on. But I think the bigger point that you were alluding to, or that you mentioned there, is the fact of the lack of community. That when you go to a land, a lot of times we're looking for a community. You're going to a new country. You're going to, like in Yemen. Okay, Yemen, I would say my initial experience there, there was a community of Western brothers. Of course, we were all single back then, pretty much. But, so we had that loose community. We'd meet each other and this and that and the other. But, there was still there was some absence of community there. So I think a lot of times, and the interesting thing is, actually, when I lived in Medina, I would say, although I had my close companions and there was a community of students of knowledge, but I felt sort of a lack of community. My family and myself, we didn't really mix with the other students of knowledge and stuff like that so much, unless there was a cultural aspect. There was a cultural aspect, meaning because my family was not American and so forth, then we might mix with other people from her cultural background. There was kind of that thing. So I would say there was a lot of time where you're sort of looking for community. So then when problems arise, you don't really have that communal support. You know what I mean? You have, so those are extra stresses, as you said, that fall upon couples that might have some issues. And it's inevitable, as human beings, you're going to have issues. So if you're not on the same page on making hijrah, and not on the same page maybe in your iman and in your view of what needs to happen next, or of staying there, then that causes other fissures in the family. And this is also a point that I recall an example when I first moved to Hijrah, Saudi Arabia. That was my first experience in Saudi Arabia after leaving Yemen, came back to America for like a month to pick up my visa, my first job in Saudi. And so I went to Hijrah. And I remember, that was very difficult, even for other Muslim families that were raised in like Jordan and other places. They were not used to the restrictions of Saudi Arabia as women, coming from Jordan,
Right.
and having her movement and stuff like this, coming to Saudi Arabia, especially at that time, and even more so in that place. And Hijrah was a very conservative place. So, women, it's a big deal. A woman walks on the street by herself to the market. That was kind of a big deal. Like I remember at the time, I had more than one family. And I remember, this is a real story. We're walking in the park during Ramadan, my two wives, and there were so many bad Saudi men that were trying to pick up on them. It was like a loop. It was a big park. I remember it's Hadika de Zaytun, a very famous park there in Hijrah. And just them being able to go by themselves and make the loop, how many prepositions did they get? How many Saudis, before they came back during Ramadan, guys backing into the bathroom like this, trying in the outdoor stall, because they were not used to seeing, culturally, women taking a walk in the park or whatever the case may be. So there is a plethora of challenges that you face, and without that sense of a community to be able to deal with those things. And what I say to people again is also that people need to, take off the glasses of idealism and just know that there are real struggles in this, and be in it to win it. Be in it to win it. And I know people were very hardcore, but then when, wars broke out, I know a brother, he left his family. And then when the fighting broke out in Yemen and this and that and the other, his wife was scared to death because she was by herself and the husband had to travel for business. She's from a particular Western country, and, there's bombs and shootings and machine guns going off and tank fire she hears. She was scared to death. So that caused obviously a split in the family. She ran back to her country. That causes divorces, and, you have children and this and that and the other. So there are very, not all the parties are on the same wavelength as far as the patience factor. So if a husband needs to die hard and he says, yeah, no, we're staying regardless. This is Hijrah. We're on this. And she's like, no, I want to go see my family. I want to do this. That can be a thing. Or I just can't live like this. This is a little tough for me. Well, you need to pack your bags then, So
right.
These things, there's a lot of issues that can arise. But again, I'm not discouraging anyone. I'm encouraging you, but I'm encouraging you to have some knowledge, to research where you're going to go to. What are you looking for in your Hijrah? I mean, just as far as a Muslim community or a place that you can practice your Islam. Me as an African American, and I would say I'm not as, just me personally, I'm not so defined, but I do have a different feel, honestly, in going to Africa. I have a different feel when the people look like me, not just because they look like me, but sometimes there's a different acceptance. Or it may be even in an Asian country. I had a very excellent experience in Indonesia. And it's not that I don't have a beautiful experience in Saudi Arabia, but there are some different things. So sometimes a person may want to keep that in mind as well, where they're going to feel comfortable, or for their children. I did not feel comfortable with my children going to the schools in Saudi Arabia, not just because the lack of academic standards or what have you. That's one issue, but they do learn Tawheed, they learn Arabic. There's a lot of benefits, but also because of the issue of, being, of racism and being from America or something. So you're in a Saudi school with the Saudi kids who've been taught all kind of different things. So they might experience the racism, which I know brothers who their children went through the whole high school experience, the whole from kindergarten to high school, and they had those experiences. Their boys grew up fighting and stuff like this. It can happen anywhere, but these are just things to consider, to keep in mind, when you're doing this. And another issue, a last thing, I know I've been talking, the issue of marriage. A lot of us, especially coming from America and the West in general, I would say, we have a glitter-eyed thing. Oh, I want to marry, you go to a Arab country, I want to marry an Arab sister. Nothing wrong with that. That's beautiful. But again, you want to look for the bottom line is whoever you marry, whatever planet she's from, there's compatibility. It's not just, mashallah, she memorized the Quran, but you can't speak to each other. You don't have, as far as for longevity, because I know a lot of people, a lot of divorces too, because of a lack of, just that lack of compatibility over the long term. You have to consider all of those things and issues of visa and sponsorship issue. These are other things because, a lot of people, they go abroad and they're single. So then these issues come up.
Right. So on that point,
another thing, but go ahead.
Nah, Jazakallah khair. Just on that last point, picking up, there's a few things that you mentioned there. Sister Albi just mentioned there. She's a single sister in the UK. She doesn't like living there. She that she doesn't have a mahram and wants to move abroad to a Muslim country. She's in her mid-40s. Can she travel abroad? There's been discussions from the shuyukh, the ulama, regarding Hijra in that instance. So I want you to hold that thought, Khalid, and speak to what you know concerning that. Matteo also had a question before about, is there a wali, Hassan, if you can put that back up, if there's such a thing as a wali for making Hijra, like some sort of formal advisor for acculturation? It's a good question. I don't think there is, but I think that's a very good consideration that should be there in various Western countries or wherever, to have an advisor of acculturation, either from the society that they're wanting to move into. I know you have these guides and these websites now saying how to acclimatize and everything, and that's often for expats, non-Muslims who are coming into the field. But I think these are some very good points, and this particular one that Matteo has highlighted, I think is very, very good. I think, Khalid, the point I wanted to mention there.
So should we deal with these questions really quickly, and then I'll turn it back to you really quickly?
Go ahead.
So this question of Matteo, Barakallahu fikum, as far as I know, there is no such thing. But what you do is you benefit from the experience of those people who have been abroad and who've moved abroad. And I've shared countless aspects of my experience with a lot of brothers and sisters who've either wanted to make Hijra or wanted to come and work so they could do talib al-ilm in places like Saudi, and poured out my insides of experience in order to make that an easier process for them, and so that they go with their eyes open, so they have knowledge about what they're doing, not to discourage them, not to belittle their what they're trying to do, but rather so that they have proper preparation. This is a famous, it's a thing, proper preparation prevents poor performance, the 5 P's. So that's something I think is very key with Hijra, to make it an easier experience, because I know many people who went and they were broke and and just didn't do it. Yes, it's the green revolution. So the other point, and as Abdullah mentions, there's many websites that give you some background and stuff like this. They give you a picture, but I don't think there's anything quite like sitting with you. If you go back to Luxembourg and you explain to some of the brothers who want to go abroad and seek knowledge or make Hijra, and especially to Yemen, they will never know the ins and outs, no matter how, generally, compared to what comes out of your experience, what you can deliver to them. So that's what I say. You gain all the knowledge you can. The websites, that's great, but also people who have done it. The first issue, the sister, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless her and preserve her and make her affairs easy. What I know that some of the scholars, now I know directly that Sheikh Muqbil, rahmatullahi alayhi rahmatin wasiya, gave a fatwa for a sister, a particular sister, to make Hijra, in her circumstances. And then when she came to Damaj, she was making Hijra from the East Coast in America. She became actually a very famous Talibat al-Ilm, really grounded female student of knowledge, and married a brother from a different culture and this and that and the other, and they probably have kids and all kind of other things. And she's so there are those experiences. They appointed a wali for her that came from her cultural background, the sheikh did, and all this stuff. So I know some of the scholars make fatawa for this. And so again, that particular question, as far as your particular situation, is best reserved for a scholar instead of just latching on to one fatawa or maybe a couple of fatawa. And secondly, what I would say in general is that looking at a lot of these duties, like the hijrah, we know that it is governed by istita'a or qudra. A lot of ibadah, your worship, is governed by whether you have the ability to fulfill that act of worship. So, as Allah mentions in one of the most famous ayat that is used as dalil or evidence to make hijrah, that they're having this munakasha with the malaika. As Allah mentions, there's a conversation between the malaika. ظالمين أنفسكم قالوا فيما كنتم قالوا كنا مستضعفين في الأرض. We were weak and oppressed in the land. And then it will be said to them, ألم تكن أرض الله واسعة. Isn't Allah's earth spacious? So anyhow, the scholars, one of the things they mention from this and from other evidences is about the ability, that there are people who are mustad'afin. They don't have the ability. If you don't have a mahram, this is a part of not having the ability to make hijrah. Even though Sheikh Muqbil, he did make fatwa for this particular sister. She explained her circumstances and her situation. The Sheikh gave a fatwa. Yes, blah, blah, blah. And he said it, they had it set up. When she came to Damaj, boom, she had a mahram. She had a wali, a mahram, someone to look after her affairs. And when brothers wanted to sit down to have a sit down with her, it was all set up. The sheikh had looked out for her and appointed Western brothers to take care of that. So anyway, I would say that if you don't have the ability, then as far as that being a duty, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. That again, you need to look at your particular circumstances. Is it an obligation for you? Now, it's something you want to because you don't like living in the UK. You can, so again, your circumstances might be a bit different, but it depends. Again, it comes down to asking Ahl al-Ilm, to asking the scholars, and you give, a part of this is the last thing I'll mention, that hukm ala shay faran ala tasawwurihi. The part of issuing a ruling is a good tasawwur, a good view of that. So meaning you need to detail your situation for someone who's grounded in knowledge. And like I said, I prefer, at least major scholars or someone, and explain your details. I'm a single sister, and explaining your details.
Nah, Jazakallah khair for that expounding, that exposition on that. Another aspect, Khalid, that we need to look at, a real thing, sticking with the theme or the strand that I'd highlighted, upon which you elucidated so well, is couples will go and travel abroad. And as you said, the brother may change. Wayak, sister, on behalf of Khalid, wayak. The brother may change. The sister may change. Circumstances may change. If the sister wants to go back to the country of origin, or the brother wants to go back to the country of origin, we've seen marital discord and subsequent divorce in those instances. And there's a question, and I'll carry on and ask you to deal with that question on how you look at that. But in order to preserve that relationship, should the couple, the individual that wants to remain in the land of the Muslims, go back with his or her spouse, or should they say no, as you've highlighted, this is Hijrah, as some brothers would say, as some sisters would say, I'm not moving, and therefore divorce, splitting the family, losing custody of the children going back with the mother, or in the case of it's the father, back into the land of the non-Muslim, and being split altogether. That's one consideration I want to give to you there. Another consideration is, last week you mentioned those families that were looked after the husband died. The women were left, the wives were left with the children, and they were looked after well. But the flip side of that, Khalid, and I've been dealing with a situation this week, is where the brother has died, families left, they move across to another Muslim land, and they're struggling really, really hard and having to do crowdfunding and all of these things in the West to get finances to provide for the family. These are, again, realities that are taking place. Now, I'm going to say, and I'm going to preempt in case you say this, yes, there's hardship, but we cannot just put it out there that, yeah, this is what they have to go through. The reward is going to be there, because sometimes the reward is the last thing on the person's mind. It's that distant because of the challenges, seeing the children hungry, seeing the children scared because they've lost their father or they've lost their mother. In the case of what one of the brothers who's close to me, when the mother died and was buried in Medina, rahimahullah, the reward is the last thing that they're thinking about. They're thinking about the immediate practical circumstances that are there in front of them. Okay. So there's that. Well, that's a reality that we need to take into consideration. There's the other reality with regards to poor education, as you said, or education that's not to the standard. And I don't mean Western education now, because many think when you're saying poor educational standards, oh, it's Western, you're talking, you want a Western education. No, we're not speaking about that. We're talking about an education that really nurtures academically and religiously. And in some cases, it's either one or the other. There isn't that synergy in some of the societies because they are developing those curricula when dealing with non-indigenous populations. And even within their own educational systems, there are things that they need to catch up with as well. That's a reality. Okay, so those are challenges that are there. I'm bringing a lot of things now, Khalid, to look at, but I will come back to the questions to remind you so we can look at that. So we have those real challenges that are taking place when losing jobs and becoming a burden, the society seeing you becoming a burden because you don't have work. I've seen individuals in that situation having to go and then start petitioning. That's the nice word. Others will say begging the indigenous people, the natives of that land to help us. And we are muhajirs. We've come here because of deen. We are converts and everything like this. And that's a plea that you see in the petition that you've seen in various lands in the Middle East and the Gulf. I'm speaking about particularly. So these are areas and real challenges, and it's not scaremonger. This is not scaremongering. We're saying we're talking about challenges. These are realities that are actually there. So you again intimated this in last week's episode, and we're talking about it today. If we are looking to move to the land of the Muslims, we need to, in this day and age, and I dare say it was the same yesteryear to a greater or lesser extent, Allahu A'lam, would have to look at the evidences in the seerah, but to have a skill, to bring something, to contribute, because that makes it a lot easier to be able to traverse those lands, to be able to exist in those particular lands. And then again, where you are moving to. Many have an idealism. I want to be near the Haramain. I want to be in the land of the Arabs. Then we have to ask ourselves, not saying there's anything wrong with that, why do we want to be in those lands in particular? As you've said, Brother Khalid, Africa, we see that I know Saudis that before the wealth and everything was discovered and Saudi was quite poor, going back to the 60s and 70s. I've got some very good Saudi friends who said they were raised in Ethiopia until the government said to them to start coming back. These are Saudis, these are Arabs. We know that a lot of the learning of the ulama from the Middle East came from India. Many of the scholars went out there because that's where the seats of knowledge were and continue to be. The same within Africa. The seats of knowledge, Timbuktu, and the history that's there. And this again comes down to one thing, and I say this no matter what ethnicity that we come from, those of us who are idealizing that we need to be in the Middle East to do Hijrah, we need to question the concept and construct and understanding that we have of Islam. Have we got an Arabized understanding? Is it Arabization? Yes, we know the language in Arabic. We know all of that, but we know that the largest population of Muslims are not the Arabs. We know that, and I'm not saying that to denigrate or to marginalize the Arabs, but we've got to look at, are we wearing those rose-tinted idealistic glasses? Because there are seats in Africa of learning, okay, of the Sunnah and its concentration. Yes, we see predominantly in the Middle East, but that doesn't mean there's an absence elsewhere. So we do need to consider the African countries where there's a lot of growth. The Muslim countries, predominantly Muslim countries, there's a lot of growth. there's a lot of welcoming, as well as you mentioned what happened in the time of Clinton. I think you mentioned when there was the call in Ghana for the African Americans to come back. There is still that call there. So whether you're a white convert, brown convert, black convert, we need to make sure that if we are talking about Hijrah, because we want to move to a place where we can better practice our deen, that we are not restricting it through a prism, a lens that is predominantly Gulf orientated. It needs to be elsewhere. Shireen has mentioned Malaysia, and when she was enrolling in the university, and while there were challenges with the visa, but once you're there in Malaysia and the society there are challenges there. I'm sure there's racism and undercurrents in every society that we move to. You've mentioned Indonesia. I mentioned last week, and I'm not saying that I know anything of that, but I went to Kazakhstan, and when I saw, okay, it's a Muslim society, and okay, it might be a very liberal Muslim society, but it's a Muslim society, and we see that Bosnia, and what's taking place in Bosnia at the moment is a key land where many are speaking, and many Arabs are going over there. If anyone wants to know what's happening in that particular area, and it's very, very beautiful. The people there are very, very humble. A British Pakistani Muslim perspective, Hijra has always been back to Pakistan. Some were born there, extended family are there, so it helps. But they know they won't be 100% accepted there because they're British Pakistani. So I've said a lot here, Khalid, and I come back to that question, that key question. If the wife with the children want to move back to the land from where they originated, or the husband, what is the rationale that should be looked at in that instance? Does the husband or the wife return with them to preserve the unity of that family? Or do they say, like many have said that I know of, talaq, divorce, okay, khulla, I'm not coming back, you go back, I'm staying here?
Yeah, again, I think Abdullah, he kind of made a point there that, again, there's a lot of variables there. There's a lot of, you know what I mean? It's not a black and white scenario, because for a lot of people, we've seen a lot of situations, exactly, there's a lot of factors around their situation. And I've seen a lot of scenarios where that, I've seen both, where there's been the splits, and I've seen where they remained and they went back and then the marriage failed. Because sometimes when it's going back, and especially if it's going back and there's that tension between the family about this issue, and it becomes very much a religious issue, because sometimes we find that we want to go back because we're craving a lot of delights of the dunya, you know. And you know, there are those scenarios too. You know, there are scenarios of people just plain and simple, they could not feel adjusted in the Muslim land, and it was so, you know, they had major problems. There are those situations too. So there's a variety of situations and scenarios, but you know, we've seen and witnessed quite a few different scenarios. So that's why I think it really comes down to that particular family's situation, you know, because if there's that wanting to go back as a, you know, as a craving for the dunya, a lot of times that can cause a great facade for the families. I mean, we've known a lot of people, they went back with their families, so-and-so's not even Muslim anymore. Not only they divorced, the sister's still a Muslim with 4 children, 5 children, 6 children. The husband, he left Islam or whatever, or got caught up in the dunya, or vice versa. So again, it's, you know, looking at the reasons, looking at the looking at the variety of circumstances. And again, there are those challenges. So for me, for many years ago, I realized, and many of us, I'm sure, realized, you know, the staying in Saudi, which was idea for many of us, was not going to be very practical. Not impossible, but not very practical with the Iqama situation and the way things were getting kind of I had noticed an anti-foreigner resentment was building in Saudi those last years I was there. And so those kind of things, you know, you do get, maybe for some of us, we get to a stage where we want to find some place that we can call home, and then we have the opportunity to do the things we need to do and related to our deen with dunya. So there's a lot of things to really look at, and that's one of the things we talked about in the last episode. That the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that hijrah min akbar al-hijra, afdal al-hijra, kama qala sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is that you make hijrah from your sins to sin to removing your sins to obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But that's one of the greatest. So always look into where you can practice your deen better. That's very, very important for us all to look at that. Where can you practice your religion better and where you're going to actually be able to practice your religion? That doesn't mean just that you're in the masjid praying, but it means obviously you need a livelihood and you need the other things that's going to help you practice your deen. If you're always in a situation of stress, like, oh, I don't know if they're going to get rid of my iqama because I don't even have a degree and I'm working at this job and they just fired my friend, and I haven't had a paycheck in 3 months. Because I know a lot of brothers too who stayed. They were hardcore. They were staying in Medina and staying in different places.
Yeah, you
either
mentioned
illegally or they didn't. Yeah, they didn't have the. So this is why I also go back to what we said is for all of these scenarios is that proper preparation prevents poor performance. Now, nothing is guaranteed, but I just say prepare yourself for the hijrah. Prepare yourself for that path of knowledge. If you're going to a place as restricted, if you're going to go to Mauritania or go to Yemen and stuff, have a few dollars and have kind of a plan, because you're not going to go to a place where these are tough lands, when you get sick and when you have those scenarios. And again, Abdullah, we have firsthand experience in especially in those places like Yemen. It's rough, and I know brothers.
And also, Khalid, sorry to interrupt, but that's true. And there's another flip side that we need to look at as well.
Right. Well, one thing I would say, and that goes back to the people with the GoFundMe. So I don't look down on anybody with those scenarios, but I have seen a lot of people who weren't making preparation, who weren't thinking about that, and then they end up in that situation too. Okay, so that's why I was always thinking, and that's because I'm a stickler or whatever, because of my first experience of having no money and being in a foreign land and having to depend on mom. Oh, mom, please help. Having that situation. And I made it to the Emirates. I ran out of my money in, the first day because I didn't realize, coming from Yemen, how different, all my money went to the hotel. The next day, I'm like, with my new wife who's pregnant with the first baby. Sorry, baby, we're going to have to, sleep in the grass out here in the masjid. That's what I thought. And there was only a brother who was looking out for us. We ended up sleeping in masajid in the Emirates on the musalla. And then until, there was wealthy Tablighi guys, they looked out for us. We had us in a hotel. Then I got the visa. We had to go to America, So, it's just, keeping those things in mind of preparing yourself. I say if someone's going to try to live in a Muslim land, try to prepare yourself with a degree, as you mentioned. Try to, I'm not saying that's a shart. It's not a condition, but you want to make your thing easier. Maybe you're the guy who can sit around and there's a war going on and you're still like, alhamdulillah, I'm just going to participate, or whatever. Some people are like that, but most people are not. And, they're not built like that. So I just say that it's good to make preparation. Sorry to cut you off. Go ahead.
No, that's okay. There's the flip side. Matthew had a good question there about the timing for Hijrah. It depends on your preparation, brother Matthew. What is the minimum? What is the maximum amount of time? It depends on what anchors you have in the land that you're leaving. What you can't just up and go and leave things open-ended and upside down. You've got to tidy one situation and prepare to move and build in another situation, the new environment that you're looking to go to. But Khalid, one thing that we need to look at as well, which is also a problem. Many will come. Yes, tying your camel, niyama, very, very important, mashallah, tabarakallah. But one situation that does happen, we know of others who come to the Muslim lands, practicing, firm, and then lose their deen in the Muslim land. Stop practicing. They revert to things that they were doing in their jahiliyyah, in the West, and they're doing it more so because they're more seasoned than the environment would have faced itself, and they almost achieve hero status because of the level and degree of jahiliyyah that they were once in, that they are now revisiting. So we hear of incidents and occasions when individuals are off their deen, multiple girlfriends, back into the music, rapping, night clubbing in the illicit places that are available, that are there, drug taking. Now, the extreme I've given there is rare of all of that marcia that's taking place. Okay. Also, as Hassan's highlighted, they're making more money than they ever made in the lands that they came from. Living in bigger homes and apartments, driving fat cars, as we would say, bringing all of that stuff there. So they've got. So what happens now is the dunya has come. The aspects have come to them a lot more easily now because of the wealth that's actually there, and they become a lot more complacent. And some will feel psychologically we've made it. Okay, so the efforts and the striving in the deen become secondary now. This has happened to a number of Muslims, brothers and sisters, who have moved into particular affluent Muslim countries and have had that wealth conferred upon them, or that comfort conferred upon them. This is a real reality. And then what actually happens, either they stay in that society because it is better than when they were in their jahiliyyah. That's one thing. And they're not practicing. I mean, they're not practicing at all. No salah, no attending the masjid. Ramadan comes and they may shoot off to South Africa and are found in lap dancing nightclubs and stuff like that. I'm talking about real cases, examples of individuals that I knew who used to work for me, okay, in one of the companies I ran in Saudi Arabia. So this is a reality that is there as well, okay? And again, other points that are being raised. Marrying a sister from a different environment, a different background, whose socio-economic position is not as strong as the individual's, and keeping her more or less like a side chick, as Hassan's used the phrase there. These things happen, and I will end on this point to cut so you can come in. You mentioned about marrying and compatibility. And we do have these problems where individuals, yes, she speaks Arabic and I want to learn Arabic. So it doesn't matter that she cannot communicate with me in English. And I can't communicate with her in Arabic. I'm going to learn Arabic from her, or him as the wife who wants to learn it from the man in that particular example. This can work, but it can also lead to disaster culturally, especially regarding the children as well. We've had scenarios as well where the husband and the wife, the iqama's run out for the husband or it's run out for the wife, and they're both from two different backgrounds. I know a brother, you and I know the brother very well, Rahimahullah, very good brother. He died. I went to his janazah in Makkah. His wife was from a totally different background. She could not go to the States. She could not stay in Saudi Arabia. They were in no man's land. His children could go because they were half American. Okay. I know another brother, when it was time to leave Saudi Arabia, he's from the UK. His wife was American. He flew, he didn't know, ignorance on his part. He flew to America with her. They said, you can't enter. You haven't done the right thing. Said, I'm just dropping them off. No, we believe you've come from nefarious reasons and you're coming from Saudi Arabia. So they basically strip searched and kept him in prison in the airport, Washington, Dulles Airport, I think it was. Underground said to his wife, you're free to go, and the children, you're American. She said no, kept them incarcerated in the airport as well. The only recourse he had was to go back to the UK with his wife and children, where he's banned from going to the States now. There's no position for them coming back to Saudi Arabia or the Middle East or anything. Alhamdulillah, very intelligent brother, very good family. They've done very well for themselves. They're in the UK now. So these various dynamics that I'm highlighting now are realities and challenges. and it can, if you're not strong, okay, in your conviction and your grounding as a Muslim, these things can throw you completely off point. And we've seen individuals leave the deen, have resentment to the deen, and it's nothing to do with the deen. It's nothing to do with the deen. And the brother Omar is saying, this is what I'm talking about, everyone, about the Iqama. Yes, if your Iqama, nowadays, your Iqama has to be with an employer. And coming from being in Saudi Arabia 18 years, I saw the change that happened. Before, when I was director of a center, I issued Iqamas to brothers that I knew. I said, but you've got to come out. You don't have to work for me. You have to go out and make sure you're working, cover the cost of Iqama. I could do that, and they did that. But then that clamped down because there'd be checks on people, the authorities turning up at work to see, can I see your Iqama? Is it with this company? Have you transferred? Are you working? Are you doing 2 shifts? You're working for this company here, but your Iqama is elsewhere, and the Iqama situation is not stable. That changed. The situation with the Iqama, you couldn't go to anyone nowadays and say, can I come under your Iqama, and just get on with things. It's still being allowed to some extent now. There are always some loopholes to allow you to do that now, but there are so many caveats that come with that as well now. The tax situation as well. You've got 5 children, you're paying for them, and you can only renew your Iqama once this has all been paid for, and the insurance. So some have issue with medical insurance. I'm going into things now to give some of the challenges. Some would say insurance is haram. We can't have medical insurance. It's mandatory that you have medical insurance if you're going to have your Iqama. No medical insurance, no Iqama. No payment of tax, no Iqama. No payment of GOSI, which is the employment thing. Even if you're not working for a company, you've got someone, a benevolent individual saying, look, just pay for your Iqama fees. Then if you don't have the GOSI paid monthly as it's got to be, no Iqama. No Iqama, you're living a life illegally in the kingdom, in the country. And as we know, with one of the things with regards to Hijrah, Khalid, we cannot move into a land and live against the law of that land. We have to be abiding. We can't say, no, I've made Hijrah and it doesn't matter and I'm going to live under the radar and everything. No, you cannot do that in any of these countries. So the Iqama, the residence visa, the employment permit is very, very, very important in that regard. So Khalid, I've brought a lot of areas. We said we're talking about challenges and things. These are challenges, but I want to say this as well. 18 years in Saudi Arabia, I still have my Iqama. Alhamdulillah, mashallah, tabarakallah, because I've got my daughters and family still there. Once you've got your situation sorted out and resolved, and I know brothers who came to work for me, and I advised them. Some didn't have any degree, but I'd let them come out. They got their Celtran. That's not a thing of today, brothers and sisters. Please don't think I'm going to get an English teaching CELTA, a 1-month program, and get out to Saudi Arabia. They're not going to open their arms to you. None of the Gulf countries are going to open their arms to you and say, please, welcome. You can come in. You're white convert, black convert, brown convert. You're from the West. It's that they don't look at you in that way anymore. You have to equip yourself. Sister Anissa's mentioning if there's wasita, it will be a big help. And wasita can help, but not always. It can run its course because you can't keep going back to the same people and saying, now I've got this problem, I've got that problem. You know how a lot of the nationals are. They will help, but if they see that you cannot help yourself once they've helped you, they will quietly distance themselves and close that door to you. So again, preparation, as you've mentioned, changing your career, the paradigm that you're in, preparing, studying, getting a qualification that will be accepted where you are, and then move into those lands. And once you're in those lands, that, as you said, there's no guarantee. You might have to change your job in a year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever. But once you've got that behind you, you can stand firmly. And if it's not in that society and that door closes, you can look around at the other societies as well. And we need to be pioneering. The Muhajirs of old were pioneers. So we need to look into lands which require our skill set, where we can still benefit and move in there to build. We should not come and become like some of the individuals where everything's become comfortable, the struggle has gone, and we think we've made it and I can relax with my deen. Because for a surety, it will affect our children and they will become diluted in their understanding, as we've seen, because all they know is the castle. They've not seen anything else. And then we'll be asking ourselves, what happened to my children? As many of us are asking, what happened to my children? Why is their deen so weak if they've still got their deen at all? So these are some serious challenges. They may happen after we've done the best planning and preparation ever, because it's down to Allah's decree at the end of the day. But we must not come out with complete idealism. As you've said, Khalid, we need to make sure we've spoken to brothers about the whys and wherefores, the hows, the do's, the don'ts with regards to Hijrah. And while we may have a better experience than the people that we're getting advice from, we might have a worse experience than the people we're getting advice from. We have to be equipped, prepared, and realistic. Faddal.
Yeah, inshallah ta'ala, barakallah fiqh. Two things I just want to mention. So with regards to people losing their deen in Muslim lands or what have you, again, istiqama or being upright is required of us no matter where we go. So we do know those cases, and especially with children, of people losing their religion in Saudi Arabia and Yemen and so forth, becoming DJs or smoking weed and stuff like this. I've known people who were students of knowledge in certain places, and I don't want to mention where, and then they were smoking weed in different places in Saudi Arabia and stuff like this. This happens. But again, that has to do with them, their crisis in faith. That can happen anywhere. So it shows us that the external alone is not sufficient. You know, you're in the land, you hear in the adhan, the ulama, Mecca and Medina. It can happen right in Medina. It can happen right in Mecca. Because again, it's the heart. As the Prophet ﷺ said, Ala wa hiya qalb. He was talking, he said, verily it's the heart. That's the asl, the root of your iman. So it's always, you need to protect your iman. The second thing is with regards to people making a lot of money. And I know this happens a lot in some of the Gulf countries. And again, it goes back to that planning, and people think that they have a permanent stay. So we know a lot of people who have gotten into debt, sisters and brothers who were so materialistic. They say, yeah, we're going to get the new Suburban. We're in debt here in Saudi Arabia, but we got a good job. We live in a villa. It's not sufficient that we have the apartment just for whatever, for our needs. You're paying rent. You don't own that. And they're paying for big villas. A sister, she has a couple kids. She's living in a giant villa, things like this. And they're in the so materialist, shopping at the, because you can shop at nice malls in the UAE and stuff better than America. And now you've got good money. So a lot of people get in that materialism. Then their commas snatched, or then they lose their job. And then what? So my point is we always need to constantly be in that planning stage to know that, hey, your stay more than likely, especially in some of those countries, is probably not permanent. The society, what we see from the reality of the push is for you to get out. The Saudis were very clear about that, through policy and in discussions. And I witnessed it through the new narratives in the newspaper. I saw it a lot with students, that they began to hear that, and that patriotism, that nationalism, and that kind of like, you go home, go. This is our country. And you saw the articles in the Arab news. I remember witnessing the rhetoric, how it changed so much in the past, especially 5 years or so. So having a preparation, but some of the people are oblivious. They're not doing talib al-ilm. They're not really gaining benefit Islamically. They're just living there. They're making a lot of money and they're buying things. And then what? So a lot of families, you saw this, subhanAllah. I was kind of amazed and was getting shocked about the scenario for a lot of people, and some people still live there. So what I would tell people who only had a little experience, meaning a few years in Saudi, saying, hey man, if they ask me advice, or if I had the opportunity, I'd say, listen, make a plan. You don't know how long you're going to get here. Yeah, that's good. You're struggling, but you look how much, not just that they're forcing you out with the taxes and stuff like that in your family, but what's next? You see, they're pushing. They don't want you here. Saudiization is real. They want they have a need to employ Saudi nationals. And that's a part, there's policy implications for them as far as the stability of their society, as far as keeping those guys from becoming members of ISIS and Al Qaeda. You got to keep them occupied. Similar to the way in the West, you have the far right or far left, people who are poor and struggling, they join these movements because they're poor. They don't have the opportunities and they're easily susceptible to ideologies. In those places, they join Takfiri groups or they join radical Shia groups because they don't have the opportunities. And Sardia knows this. So they're very much into Saudiization. We're going to give you every opportunity to have a job. You can go to college. You can get this paid for. So my point is people need to realize what's going on in their society. And again, in the Ma'amal al-Biniyat, as you mentioned, as the Prophet said, verily actions are tied to the intentions. So as far as your intention for the Hijrah, you're going to be rewarded even if you're forced out. You still, as long as you have true intention and you strove, then okay. But again, making the preparation and also thinking what's next. You know, if you're living in Saudi and you still want to be abroad in a Muslim land, think about what's next, or a place you can practice your deen and so forth. Always think about that. And that's for me. While for me, it was like coming back. I know I'm from America. I can buy property in America. I can do, and there's no restrictions. I don't need an Iqama. This is, so I still want to have a place maybe in Yemen, and I would love to in Saudi, to have those, you want those extra, you want to be able to have residence in a Muslim country. This is, or in Egypt or Turkey or somewhere. But I know I had to eventually was coming back to America. So you just need to prep yourself.
Now, I want to keep Mattio's question up for you, so you can answer that, and I want to let Matteo know how I think about it. I think that's a very, very good question that you've asked. Alhamdulillah, in the work that I've been doing, Matteo, in educational leadership and everything, seeing the fruits of the organizations that I've helped to build, establish, students being taught, and seeing where they are now, that's something that, while I haven't done Hijrah, gives me a reassurance and it humbles me. And I'm thankful to Allah that I can, when I'm still with Saudi Arabia, but I can see, and I'm still in touch with students who are all over the world now. And you can see the benefits there. You can see the organizations have flourished and they're thriving. And if we can contribute, and as you said, leave the lands that we are in or were in a better state, even if it's a microcosmic state in a job that we were in, an example that we left, we were exemplars for the place we were. And yeah, this brother was a convert and he came from the UK, or this sister, or what, even if we're not converts, and they can reference that memory of you as a practicing Muslim from the West on a microcosmic scale. It doesn't have to be organizational, like what I'm discussing now, which is, again, is microcosmic. That should be a legacy that is automatically left by us as examples. Very good question that you've highlighted, and I'll pass it to Khalid to answer the question directly as it's addressed to him.
Yeah, I probably won't add too much to from what you said. But I will say honestly, I never really had, and a lot of us don't necessarily have the intention to, maybe some people to give benefit. I did, in the sense that, I guess, leaving out there, I'm going to teach English and I'm going to, I did have that intent, and on a daily basis. And for sure, without doubt, I was known, for most of my time there in the various universities I worked with. Now, when I worked for Saudi Aramco, they were very restrictive about talking about religion and stuff like this for various reasons, even though it was just a part of me. It can't, you're not going to hear coming out of my mouth saying something, except that you're going to hear inshallah, mashallah. Oh, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes that easy for you, may Allah bless you, whatever. Even if we're talking about English whatever. So no doubt, tremendous amounts of dawah, because it was just, a part of who I am, and the mashayikh, especially when I lived in Medina, telling my students, yeah, Sheikh Abdul Haqq has a dars, you guys should come, whatever. But I would say, honestly, I've had, and it's probably not I'm not being low in numbers, but maybe at least thousands of students have probably graduated, for the years that we spent there. Definitely at least hundreds, up to 1,000 or more, have graduated at your hands. So you've had contact with many who graduated as far as their dunya studies. And we, of course, always left them with fawaid, benefits, Islamic benefits, and advice. Always advising, especially when I had more freedom to speak. But even in Aramco, my students, they knew, they couldn't help but to see me on break in the sun reading. And I didn't know you could read Arabic. Yeah, and reading about Tawheed and an explanation of something I'm going to teach later. They got lots of different dawah. So we did try to do the best we can to leave something. So it is important. Yes, we should try to have that intention when you are making hijrah, that you are going to give benefit to that society and so forth. But or as far as at least help them until a local can take over. I mean, that's a great noble thing. I don't think most of us are thinking that way, but and thinking about helping them to Saudaize and take over our positions and kick us out. But that may be the reality. A lot of times you're training people to kind of replace you. And then, I've had a lot of students and some people who are minor colleagues, then they went away and they got their PhDs years ago before myself, but in English and stuff. And they're running the programs which we used to be colleagues for. And some even were my students. Some were my students who barely knew English, and they got their doctorates now, and they're professors in universities in Saudi teaching professors in English or whatever they chose to pursue. So yeah, you leave those fruits.
And there's an interesting paradigm to consider there from what building on from what you said, Khalid. Two things. We are mainly, whether it's Hijrah or out like me working here, we are mainly service providers for the nationals. That's a fact. No matter what level you're in, I'm in educational leadership, management, whatever. We are service providers for the nationals. That's the basic reality of many expats that are in these regions. Secondly, what you started off with in your answer, Khalid, with regards to, are we looking to benefit the people? I would say, building off what Matthias asked, it depends. If you're going for Hijrah, often we're going for our own benefit.
Yeah.
Primarily.
Yeah.
However,
and even for talib al-ilm, we're going.
You're going for your own benefit.
Yeah.
However, there's another paradigm or parallel trajectory that if we're coming out here to benefit our family, but we're coming out here to work, that focus has to be because we're coming out to a job that we are going to be a benefit of the employer, of the company, of the institution, of the wider society. So I think it depends. It's down to intention. It depends on how you are coming over to these lands. Student of knowledge, Hijrah, primarily for yourself. Employer, whilst with that is bringing your family into a good environment, being there as long as you can, but I've got to be marketable and I've got to be beneficial to the employer, to the client, to the wider society on a whole, as a component of the wider society. So there are two different rationales that you would be coming out to these lands with, depending on the intention for your travel, for your traversing the lands that you are going to. And Khalid, if there's not anything else to add to that, you're welcome, Brother Matteo, mashallah. If there isn't anything else to add to that, we can conclude. But you've got a question there from Awatif, mashallah, and I'll leave you to get on with that answer, inshallah.
I've been forced to live in the UK because my mom, but it should be mom, no, just kidding. She lives there with my two brothers and sisters. Again, those are issues at looking at, when it comes to a hukum, a ruling about your particular situation. This is better for you. That doesn't have to cut out your hijrah. You can still be on that path, preparing while your mother's still living, because that's a great duty, a great shari'i duty to take care of your mother, especially since you're still in the UK. Now, again, as far as the hukum, the ruling, explaining your situation and whether you're able to practice your religion or not, and all those things, that will be something you will refer to a person of knowledge. A sheikh who has that caliber of knowledge. But what I would say as general advice is you can prepare for that. But right now, your mother needs you. So while you're preparing, meaning you're stacking your money, you are preparing yourself. If you're not married, preparing yourself. Either you're going to marry there in the UK or you might marry abroad. You're preparing, you're doing your research, you're getting yourself on that path. But you have two brothers and a sister, I don't know what their ages are, that you might be looking out for them. They might totally need you. And then you leave. In that situation, only Allah knows best if that is, what the hukum is on that. Okay. Is it a greater maslaha that you make the hijrah? Maybe if you're in a place where you cannot practice your religion, the hukum may vary. So that's why you need to talk about your situation with a scholar. But what I would say is, in preparation for your hijrah, right now, take care and look after your mom or your mum, and look out for your brothers and sisters, because they might need you. They may need your mentorship right now, and you leave them. They might struggle financially. They might struggle Islamically. They might struggle in their dunyawi tarbiyah. So there may be a greater maslaha for you now to prepare yourself while you're looking out for them until your mom is.
Jazakallah khair. This reminds me of a question that Hassan asked us last week after the show. Many brothers and sisters who are out here in the Middle East, in the Muslim countries, in Africa, in Asia, where it may be, their parents emigrated to the UK, America, the West, and they are now elderly, and they require the help of their children. This is a challenge. Brother Hassan is one of them, if he doesn't mind me asking and saying this, that they may have to return from their sojourn, I use the term sojourn here, in the Muslim lands, to fulfill that obligation of looking after their parents. Now, had they made Hijrah, this is a challenge that needs to be addressed by scholars, that we're going back to the land of the non-Muslims. Our parents can't come over here. We can't afford to keep them over here. They cannot acclimatize here. They're settled in the land of the West, whichever land it may be. We need to pack up, because I've been speaking to brothers here in Dubai, brothers in Saudi, saying we need to go back and look after our parents, having lived here for 15 years, 20 years. Have you come across those scenarios? Do you know what the scholars have said concerning this?
I've definitely come across those scenarios. I'm not really sure, and that's what I would say, that people need to look at their particular situation, because perhaps as a temporary thing, going back to look after your parents, because if they're elderly, they, only Allah knows who's the lifespan of someone, but we can assume that their lifespan is, they're at a critical stage in their life and they need that care. So maybe you're going back with the intent to go back to a Muslim land at a later date. So again, your intention is very important. But if you go back, you're just looking at that as a reason to go back, and you're just like, yeah, forget Hijrah. I already did it, and it was difficult anyway. I'm going back to the UK. Yeah, I'm looking out for mom, but I'm also want to get comfy and whatever. It's gonna revolve around your intention. So that's why those are important things for people to look into, especially those who live in the Muslim lands. They have access to higher calibers of scholars, if you will. They can go and get those have those things dealt with directly, and have it sent even to the major scholars. Hey, Imam Fozan, here's the scenario. We have a group of brothers who have this scenario, and we're end up having to leave back because of our mothers who are Muslim or non-Muslim, whatever the case may be, who need to be looked after. Can we go back when we had the intention to make Hijrah, to at least for a temporary time, or whatever, so those are things that people need to look at for their particular scenario.
Jazakallah khair, Khalid. There's so much more that we could address. Brothers, sisters, you've been contributing amazingly as usual, mashallah tabarakallah, which has stoked the conversation even more, and the insights and observations. We will not be here next week. That usually it's next Sunday that we'd be there, the fortnight, but we are going to let you have some respite from us now. You've had a double whammy for
it's up to
each
you,
week.
or if you have the time, we can do it next week.
This will be up to the audience after we conclude. If they want to let Khalid, brother Hassan, and the facilitators of Stream Islam know they want us to be here next week, which would be our fortnightly slot usually, please let them know, and we are here at your service, inshallah. But for now, we're coming up to the 1.5 hour mark, which we usually do now because we've got so much to discuss. We will draw to a conclusion. Jazakallah khair, Sharin, for your kind words, and Jazakallah khair to all of you for your contribution as usual. You, brother Khalid, Dr. Khalid as well. And I think it was strictly YouTube. Yeah, green is true. Piece of cake, Abdurrahim Green. Doctor's Lab with Dr. Khalid Green. I suppose green is now my favorite color as opposed to blue, mashallah tabarakallah. But Jazakallah khair to all of you. And until next week or a fortnight, depending on you, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
I want to say one thing before you disappear, Doctor. Why?
Okay.
Because as Hassan mentioned, we can't be part of the community in the Middle East, can't give dawah, can't volunteer for charity without government approval. So even with this scenario, we are able in Saudi Arabia, there are opportunities to work with the Tawa'id Jaliyat, and so they have their organizations. It's just more restricted. So there are opportunities even to do dawah and to participate even there, but there is perhaps a different sense of community. So I just wanted to end on that. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Barakallahu fikum.
And with what they've just said, you may see us next week. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.